Dean in North Carolina. You're talking to Eric and B.
What's going on, guys? Hey, I've done
buddy.
research and I believe in Planet X. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just joking. So, question I have for you guys. I know that skepticism is a big deal for you guys. What do you think is the threshold for that? How skeptical is too skeptical as far as an epistemology?
I think when you can't get out of bed in the morning, you probably go too deep.
You've reached the limit.
Yeah.
I think that skepticism taken to an extreme becomes hard solipsism, right? Which is not sustainable.
Agreed.
It looks like V, we lost you. We lost your audio.
I'm here. Oh, V. We lost V.
We lost V's audio for a second.
Okay.
So you're asking where we draw the line?
Yeah, like how far is too far as with regards to skepticism as an epistemology?
Totally depends.
Okay.
It totally depends on what's going on. If you're talking about what to have for breakfast in the morning, your skepticism probably should be, hey, is this orange juice or is this Drano? You should probably check. Are the eggs still good or have they expired? How do you know? We should check. Those things are important. But if you're talking about really, really important things that have major impacts on your life, things like investing your money, trusting your children in childcare, right? Putting them in the hands of somebody you don't know to watch them. And especially claims like those that are made in the Bible, things that talk about an eternal damnation and an eternal reward, that requires much more skepticism than it requires for me in breakfast.
Mm-hmm. So to come to a conclusion to something, you wouldn't say that you. Well, let me ask you in a more fair way. Would you say that you're a Cartesian skeptic in that sense?
No, simply because Descartes actually fooled himself into thinking that he fixed the problem. He got to cogito ergo sum, and then he became circular after that. I do my best and go from there. I don't know exactly. Maybe I'm not understanding your question, Dean.
Well, and maybe I'm not asking it good enough. I guess my question is, when we say let me try and think of something real quick. So if I wanted to say Nero was responsible for the burning of Rome back in the 1st century, maybe this is a historical claim. At what point does maybe a
Sure.
Let me ask you, I guess you see what I'm saying. Like, how far do I go with my skepticism before I can,
Absolutely. Do I have evidence of people setting fires?
Possible to know.
Well, I mean, I have plenty of evidence of ineptitude in leadership. I've seen plenty of examples of so many normal things that if you're saying, about a simple verse, from the Bible, Jesus walking and saying, I will make you fishers of men. Did he say that? I don't care. People talk. We have evidence that people communicate with each other. We have evidence that there were fishermen, all of those things are fine. And I wouldn't say that you need to be ridiculously skeptical about obvious claims. The skepticism comes in the resurrection. The skepticism comes in the miracles. The skepticism comes in the claim of everlasting life and a soul. So if you're talking about Nero, I mean, sure, did Nero exist? Yeah. I mean, did somebody named Yeshua exist? Probably. Now, tell me about the miracles, because that's where the skepticism is needed.
Well, I'm just trying to understand. I'm not trying to necessarily argue for a miracle here or there. I'm just trying to understand skepticism a little bit more, in the sense that it can be, or would you agree that it can be detrimental to one's epistemology? So, for instance, if I took an extreme view, I was kind of mentioned earlier by V, if I took an extreme view and said, well, there's no way that I could know that I'm not a brain in a vat, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to go around and argue that, yeah, I am. Because I don't know, there's a 50-50 chance that I am a brain in a vat and I'm not a brain in a vat, right?
No.
No, not at all. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. Dean, I'm gonna give you a different definition of my version of skepticism and hope that this helps a little bit. And I apologize for sound quality. My external mic died.
It's all good.
So I consider skepticism to be apportioning belief to the evidence. And I'm going to add on to that and its impact on me. Because we can be skeptical about things until they're proven or sufficiently supported. But we also have to be reasonable about what we're actually researching, right? And how we're spending our time and what is necessary to know and what is not. So I could say, I think that Nero burned Rome. I learned that. I'm not 100% sure that's actually what happened, but it doesn't impact my life. So I'm going to choose to spend my time researching things that do impact my life. And so there are two parts to this, right? There's the part where it's not a 50-50 thing. It's not 50-50. It could be a brain in a vat. It could not be a brain in a vat. It's how much evidence is there for either position, and which one has more and which one has better evidence, and which one makes fewer assumptions about things that haven't been proven. That's the one I'm going with out of necessity. And then there's that second part, which is it useful for my life to determine whether or not I'm a brain in a vat? Not really. This is my life. This is how I'm interacting with the world. If it's a simulation, if it's not a simulation, it's not really going to change how I live my day-to-day. For all intents and purposes, I am a human among other humans in a world that exists, and that's how I'm going to be interacting with it. And so for me, skepticism are those two points. And that's why questions about Jesus's divinity or the resurrection just don't quite get to me. Because first of all, yes, to a certain extent, was there someone named Yeshua? Sure, fine, we'll grant that. But that's not useful to my life until you can also prove that resurrection is possible, that miracles are possible. And then we have that conversation about, okay, where's the evidence? And then after we determine that, we say, okay, now that we know this, now that we have a decision here, is this applicable to my life? If you can prove to me that the resurrection happened, then yes, it's going to be applicable to my life. But you have to do that first. And so far that hasn't happened. And so I don't even really care. Does that make sense?
No, that makes perfect sense. I'm just, I think I've got a better hold on skepticism as a epistemology. I've just been looking at different, theories of epistemology. I've been studying skepticism probably the last couple of days, and I figured that I should call in and talk to two people that hold that view. So,
yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely one of the tools that we use. It's not. I mean, if you only have skepticism, it's going to be pretty difficult. But we also have different opinions about the way we should treat each other, and that's not based in skepticism. That's humanism. In that way, it's one of the tools. It's an important one, but it's not the only one. Otherwise, you're going to wind up with, I think, where you're at, which is, if all you have is skepticism, how do you get out of bed in the morning if I'm not a brain in a vat? It's
Yeah.
way too specific. It's way too it's hyperbolic.
Right, and there's also something to be said for using terms colloquially and then using terms in the philosophical sense. So in the same way that atheist in the philosophical sense may mean a positive non-belief in a God, or positive belief that God does not exist. When you meet most people and they say they're an atheist, what they mean is they aren't convinced, right? That's what most people mean when they say that. And so the same thing goes with skepticism to an extent. As a philosophical concept, it's useful to a point, but then, as with all philosophical concepts, you get to the extremes and it becomes a little bit untenable for real life. So there is the philosophical definition of skepticism, which I'm aware of and which helps inform my worldview. But when I say I'm a skeptic, I mean it in the colloquial sense most of the time. So mostly when I say that I'm a skeptic, I mean what I laid out earlier, that I apportion my belief to the evidence and its impact on my life. And I use that to look at the world. But yeah, it's worth noting that you can look at the philosophical definitions of these things to a point, and if we're having a philosophical discussion, that's awesome, and I would love to get into that. But when we're on the show, when we're talking about being atheists, when we're talking about being skeptics, it's more of a colloquial definition that is broader and a little bit less technical, if that makes sense.
Touché, that makes sense. I've got one more question, and then I'm out of here. Do you believe that androgynous cats exist?
I've met one.
Fully. I can prove it. I've got a merch store.
Well, I'll head out of here. It's always a pleasure talking to you guys. You're awesome. Keep rocking the show, and it's the best one on air. So take care.
Take care, brother.
Thank you, Dean. Fun story. Dean and I are going to be. Dean invited me onto his show, so we are going to have a couple of episodes of me talking with Dean on his Daily Apologist podcast coming out, I believe, in July. So. All
right.
Yeah.
I look forward to it. Very cool. Alrighty. Let's see here. I'm kind of the planet stuff. It's just still in my brain. But that's okay.